Hello, this is the project for the J Treaty. I don't really have an intro, so let's just jump right in. Okay, so a little background. So, in the late 1700s, the United States had just recently gotten its independence and was trying to get its footing in the world and establish trade routes and trade rights with other countries. And of course, one of the biggest trading partners you could get in the world back then was the United Kingdom, Great Britain. Only problem for the United States is that it had just fought a war against Great Britain. So tensions were a little high, but they still wanted to trade with them because they were such a lucrative trading partner. So dealing with these issues and getting them out of the way was very, very important. So some of the main issues were garrisons in the Northwest Territory, where the British troops basically had still garrisoned troops and forts along the northwest border inside U.S. territory, which of course is kind of a big deal. The British were also harassing U.S. trade ships by privateering their shipping and impressing their sailors into press gangs, where the British would board American ships and force their sailors into the Royal Navy, which was kind of also a big deal. Um, the British also had this issue with the United States and its war debt, where basically colonists, former colonists, still owed money to British merchants and bankers before they declared independence, and that was a huge sticking point that was still left over from when the United States got its independence and won the war that never really got really officially dealt with. And so tensions between the United States and Great Britain were still high, and especially the issue of privateering and impressment could possibly lead to war again, which is not a war that the United States wants to fight and is in any position to fight. So they really want to negotiate this treaty. So John Jay, who the treaty is named after, uh, is a pretty impressive figure. He's a founding father who served during the Revolutionary War as a diplomat to Spain to try to convince them to join the war. He was also at the Treaty of Paris and helped negotiate for the side of the United States to make sure that the United States did not get screwed by the other great powers and asserted itself. And he served as the first ever Secretary of State under the Constitution government under George Washington. And later in life, after this, he would be the first Chief Justice of the United States. So definitely a very competent person that's leading U.S. diplomacy and foreign policy at this time. So eventually, the United States and Britain does come to the table, and they do sign the Jay Treaty. Um, and the Tree Treaty was very much a give and take treaty for the United States. The United States gained some things, and they also gave some things. Uh, but overall, it is a very favorable treaty for the United States. So as you can see, Britain does pay for damages for American shipping, $11 million, but they also receive £600,000 for the unpaid pre-war debts before the United States declared its independence, which had been a sticking point ever since the Treaty of Paris. Um, the British also agreed to vacate the forts and the northeastern territories of the United States. The United States gave most favored nation trading status to Britain and vice versa, which is basically what that means is that you treat they would treat each other as the most important trading partner. They would not give each other more tariffs or more restrictions on trade than they would give to anyone else. There was also the issue of compensation for slaves. During the Revolutionary War, Britain um, was raiding the South and would often free slaves from plantations in the South as a means to hurt the Southern economy. And many Southern legislators really pressed for this issue of getting compensation back for those slaves that were free during the war. Um, Britain was not very willing to give into that. And John Jay himself was not a huge fan of slavery. He would later be known as an abolitionist, actually. So he also was pretty light on pushing for that. So that eventually gets dropped. And overall, this is a pretty good deal for the United States. Yet, when after it is signed, many citizens in the United States absolutely hate this. They hate the fact that we gave up anything at all. They saw the treaty, they saw what Britain was doing before the treaty as their fault. They were the ones impressing our sailors. They were the ones they were the ones, stationing troops in our border. They should be the ones to give us stuff. We shouldn't have to give up stuff to them. Well, in reality of politics and signing treaties, that's unreasonable. And what what the United States got, was more than good. But the southern states especially, were very angry about not getting any compensation for their slaves. The Jeffersonian Democrats were upset because they did not like cozying up to Britain. They would much rather. Jefferson was very adamant about cozying up to France, as they helped us out during the war. He was very fond of France. Um, and at this time, around the time of the Dray Treaty, France and Britain were at war with one another, and tensions were rising because of the French Revolution. Um, and France was very upset by the favored trade treaty. They France was very upset at the fact that the United States was snuggling up to Great Britain, and in retaliation began to attack U.S. shipping, which would lead to the quasi-war between the United States and France. Jefferson was very adamantly opposed by the treaty, and when he becomes president in the 1800s, the treaty is going to go up for renewal under his presidency, and he's going to choose to not sign it. And all of these issues are going to come back. The issues of British impressment, and the issues of stationing British troops at the U.S. border in Canada. All of these things are going to come back and become issues again, even though they're fixed. Now, well, the United States is just going to kind of throw it away later, and it's going to become the main causes of the War of 1812. It's a war that we avoided in the late 1700s, but didn't get into just a couple decades later. And that's all. And I don't have an editing software, so you have to watch as I very awkwardly pause the recording. Ooh.